People laughed at Blake when his idea was to start a shoe company basically where he gave away shoes for every pair that was sold. People laughed and said that was ridiculous. It's more about putting other people ahead of you.
Her oldest daughter is 26 and her youngest baby is 2 years old. She has on occasions bought shoes, but for the most they didn't have. Not for all.
When you have Tomsitis, every time you see a child, you want to give them a pair of shoes.
People want to be a part of something that is good.
This is what the shoe drop is all about.
They maybe have never been with shoes in their feet.
He had one pair of new shoes in his life, and it's his second new pair of shoes. This is the greatest thing ever.
Look what's happened in the last 6 months. We just gave away 8,000 pairs of shoes. Anybody who's starting a small company, everybody who has an idea, incorporate giving in what you do.
Ladies and gentlemen, Blake Mycoskie.
Thank you. Let's see, I have a little clicker over here. It's supposed to be a PowerPoint clicker. Did Chris run off with it? Oh, over there. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so 4 years ago, I was doing something completely different with my life. I was actually running an online driver's education company. And I know that's a little bit, sounds like an oxymoron, but I had convinced the state of California, where I live, that I could teach teenagers to drive online better in the classroom. And when we got it approved by the state of California, that was the good news. The bad news is with anything that the state approves, they have to open it up for anyone to compete in that space. So what happened was I found myself and my other partners, with all these new competitors trying to race to create the first software program that would allow this curriculum to exist online. And so literally went through a period, I'm not kidding, of 8 to 9 months, and I'm sure many of you have been there before, of just manic working. I mean, 80, 90-hour weeks, sleeping at the office, working Saturdays, Sundays. I mean, we were determined to have our program launch first. And after doing this for 8 months, we did launch our software first. But in doing that, when I got done and it was actually working and we all took that sigh of relief, I was so exhausted that I just knew I had to take a break. So I went to my partners and I said, guys, I really want to take some time off to refresh and recharge, and they agreed. And I decided to take a month and go somewhere and completely unplug. And I decided to go to Argentina. And there's a little bit of a backstory of why I went to Argentina. 3 years before that, my sister and I had been on this reality TV show called The Amazing Race. How many people have seen that show, so I can get a frame of reference? Okay, so probably not as many because it's a show in the States. I think it does get syndicated other places. But basically it's a scavenger hunt around the world. And it's on prime time on CBS in the United States. It's one of their more popular shows. And you have a partner, and my partner is my sister Paige. But the purpose of the show is you race around the world in this big scavenger hunt. And you go to all these different countries that you've never been to. And the winners get $1 million. So my sister and I did the show, and after racing around the world for 31 days, we lost $1 million by 4 minutes. 4 minutes, $1 million. And the worst part about it was my fault. And for all the men in the room, I completely epitomized the cliche that guys do not like to stop and ask for directions. Because there was this moment when my sister turned to me, of course, on national television, and says, "Blake, we're about to win $1 million. Don't you think we should stop and get a map?" And I say, of course, "Paige, don't worry, I know exactly where I'm going." 30 minutes later, we're lost. 10 more minutes after that, we lose the $1 million. And it's funny because, a little side story, my sister, about a month after the show was over, I got this text message from my sister, and it was just this random string of numbers. So I thought the phone had maybe gone off in her pocket and it had accidentally dialed me, so I didn't think much of it. And so a month later, I get another text message from her, and it's a different random string of numbers. And so this time I call her and I say, "Paige, why are you sending me these random text messages?" And she says, "Blake, those numbers aren't random. That's the interest you owe me on my $500,000. And she's been keeping track of this ever since. And that was 8 years ago. So I have to sell a lot of shoes. But back to Argentina. So we had gone to Argentina on the Amazing Race. We'd rushed right through it like all the other countries. And so when I had this chance to take a month off, I decided to go to Argentina. So I go to Argentina, and this time I'm going to really immerse myself in the culture. And so anyone who has ever been to Argentina or has seen a guidebook for Argentina, it's pretty well known for some specific things. The first is tango. So I thought, okay, I'll take some tango lessons. Well, I have absolutely no rhythm, and after 3 or 4 lessons and a lot of disapproving looks from my teacher and the unfortunate people who got partnered with me to dance, I moved on to something else. And the next thing that Argentina is really well known for is polo. And I grew up in Texas riding horses, so I thought, I would be a little bit better at that. But, it's one thing to ride a horse on a trail in Texas, another thing to gallop down a field trying to hit a little white ball. So after falling off the horse many times, I decided that's not for me. And so the third thing that Argentina is really well known for that I found was very suitable to me was the red wine, the Malbec. And so I spent the rest of my trip traveling around, drinking lots of great red wines. And when I was traveling around, I ended up in this cafe and heard a group of people in the corner speaking in English, which was nice because most of the people I was with were only speaking in Spanish. And I went up to them and asked them what they were doing in Argentina in this cafe. And we started chatting. And they explained to me they were there doing volunteer work. Now, at this point in my life, I had never really done any volunteer work. I had known people, and friends of my family's church had gone on mission trips and things like that, but I had never really had a hands-on experience doing volunteer work. And as they explained what they had been doing for the past month, you can just tell there was a real energy and excitement in their voice. And specifically, they were working on something called a shoe drive. And when I asked them what a shoe drive was, they explained to me that they were going around to the wealthy families in Buenos Aires. They were collecting these slightly used shoes, and they were taking them to these children that lived in this village just 2 hours outside of town because many of the kids did not have shoes. Now, I said, okay, well, they don't have shoes. They can't be the end of the world. Why is that, such a bad thing? And they explained then that many of these kids, because they didn't have shoes, weren't able to go to school because the school nearby had a uniform requirement, and it included a pair of shoes. So they were giving these kids shoes, so not only would it protect their feet, but they would be able to go to school. That was a lot more interesting to me. And so after hearing more about it and getting to know them over the afternoon of hanging out, I basically invited myself to come along and help distribute these shoes. So I think it was 4 days later, I'm in this van with a bunch of people I just met with a U-Haul connected to it, and we're going to this village to give these shoes. Now we get to the village, and I had no idea how excited these kids were to get these shoes. They came running out of every nook and cranny, and this was a village that was largely put together by, very kind of small, kind of almost houses built out of, aluminum siding and even trash. And so they were popping out everywhere, and they were getting these shoes, and the parents were so excited. And as I watched the volunteers just open their hearts up to these kids and give them these shoes, I got really excited as well, and I wanted to help. So I got on my hands and knees, and I started putting shoes on these kids' feet. And it was such an incredible experience. And I remember leaving that day in the van with my new friends, just feeling so filled, mentally, spiritually. I was just totally filled up with joy of what we did and these smiles that we saw with these kids. And I got back to the place I was staying that night, I was staying at a farm, and the guy who I was having dinner that night was actually the guy who was teaching me how to play polo, and I was telling him about this experience, and I was so excited, and we were talking, and he was like, "That's so great, that's so nice that you did that, what a great feeling," and by the end of dinner, he asked me a question. He said, "Blake," he said, "I have one question." He says, "Those kids, if that's their only pair of shoes, they're going to grow out of them or wear out of them pretty quickly. Who's going to give them their next pair of shoes?" And I looked at Alejo, is his name. I looked at him, and I realized I didn't know. I didn't know the answer. I mean, I assumed the nonprofit that we were working with was going around collecting more shoes, but I also knew that that day there were many kids that didn't even get shoes because we didn't have the right sizes, because these shoes weren't bought for them. They were the hand-me-downs of someone else. And so I went to bed that night, and I must be honest, I was like really still excited about the good feelings I had when we gave those shoes away. But then I had this other kind of feeling almost of dread, of concern, of did we really do something that was good for those kids? Or did we do something that actually is going to make them worse off because they're going to get used to wearing shoes and someone's not going to be there to give them the next pair? And so I woke up the next morning and I was having coffee, and I don't know how you guys are, but if I ever have any kind of good idea, it's usually in the morning with that first cup of coffee. And so I'm sitting there and I'm drinking my coffee, and Alejo comes up and we start talking, and that's when I turned to Alejo and I said, "Look, last night we were talking about, the next pair of shoes for these kids, and it's really kind of concerned me. And I was thinking this morning, instead of looking to charity and looking to wealthy families who are going to make a donation to give these kids their second pair of shoes, what if we looked at it from an entrepreneurial perspective? What if I actually started a shoe company its whole purpose was to fund, giving of these shoes. So every time we sold a pair of shoes, we would give a pair of shoes, one for one, really simple. And we could take these shoes, kind of like this red shoe you see here, the classic Argentine Alpargata, and kind of redesign it, maybe give it a better insole and better outsole. And every time we sell one, we'd give one away. And this was not a business plan. This was not like, oh my gosh, this is going to be huge. This was simply just a what if. I mean, I still had to get back to running my driver's ed company. So this was just a kind of, what do you think? And Alejo, bless his heart, he's a very excited young Argentine guy, and he gets very excited about anything that is cool, and especially if it involves his country. And so he was just responded with, "Oh my God, this is amazing! We have to do this." And I was kind of like, "No, this is just an idea." He's like, "No, this is amazing. This could help all those kids get shoes, and I know someone who knows someone, and they could help us with this." And so by lunch, he had convinced me that you know what. It shouldn't be just an idea. This is something we should actually do. So I, spent all afternoon with him kind of sketching out some ideas, and him making phone calls to different people he knew that knew someone that made these artisan shoes. And by that evening, we already had a couple people that would see us. The only problem was this is week 4 of my 1-month vacation, and I have to go back to work. So the next morning, I ended up calling the guys and say, "Look, here's the deal. I had this idea. I think it'll help these kids get shoes. There's about 200 kids in this village. If you can give me a couple more weeks, I want to come back with some of these shoes and see if it works." Luckily, they were, I could hear, I think, the passion in my voice, and they said, "Okay, fine." So Alejo and I spend another 2 or 3 weeks luckily finding some artisan shoemakers, and we make the first 250 pairs of what became TOMS shoes. I put them in 3 duffel bags. I come back to Los Angeles, and I get home, and I'm so excited because I got some pictures of the kids on my first trip, and I had the shoes, and I realized very quickly, though, that I don't have any kind of experience at all, or even connections to retail and fashion and shoes, and so that was going to be a problem. But one thing I did know is that I had a lot of girlfriends that spend a lot of money and a lot of time buying shoes. So I had a dinner party, and I invited them all over. And it's quite funny because they walked in, and instead of having dinner on the table, I had all these brightly colored shoes that I'd made. And they're kind of like, "What's this?" And I started to tell them, I made these shoes with my friend Alejo, and we're going to try to start selling them, and I want to get your opinion. But I didn't tell them about the 1-for-1. I didn't tell them about the cause. I wanted to see what their initial response just to the design and style was. And so as I watched them try them on and talk to each other and look in the mirror and do all these things that women do when they're looking at shoes, I got very excited because they really liked the comfort. That was the first thing they talked about. And then they talked about, oh, this is cute. I could wear this with this, with these denim pants and this. And so I let them start talking about it enough. And then I stopped them and said, but here's the real deal. When I sell this pair of shoes, we're going to sell them for $40. We're going to give a pair just like it to a child in Argentina that doesn't have shoes. And I started pulling out my pictures. And I saw these girls' eyes light up like I've never seen girls' eyes light up when shopping. And they were so excited. I mean, they were ecstatic. I mean, not only did they give me a list of all the stores I should take it to in Los Angeles that night and help me and coach me on how to do that, but they all bought a pair and they all promised to tell all their friends. So I had the list, and I ended up, spending my time kind of on the weekends going to some of these stores. And eventually I got them in this really hip store in Los Angeles called American Rag. And, I went in there, and I didn't really know what to expect. I had about 230 pairs total in my inventory. And I got the lady to buy 80 pairs. But when she bought them, she said, here's the deal, Blake. The style's cool, and I love the cause, but we got to find a way to tell your story, because the story is what's going to get people excited. So I gave her this picture of me and one of the kids, and she put this in the front window of this store. She put 80 pairs, which she had bought, all around it, like in a collage. And then I wrote on a piece of paper, with every pair purchased, TOMS will give a pair to a child in need, 1 for 1. And so I put that there, and I went back to work. Now I'm back at the Online Driver's Ed doing my regular job. And I'm so excited because I've sold 80 of my 240 pairs, or 250 pairs. I also had created a little website, very rudimentary, but you could go and click on and buy pairs. And I sent the link to my friends and family, and we started selling about 2 or 3 pairs a day to friends and family and old college buddies. So this all happened within about a month of me being back from Argentina. So I'm thinking, if I can sell 250 pairs in the first, say, 4 or 5 months, I can go back, and that's about the time that all these kids will need another pair of shoes. And if we could repeat that 3 times a year, we could keep them in shoes the whole time. And that would be my way of kind of keeping these kids in shoes in a sustainable way. So about a week after this goes up in the store, I get a call from this woman named Booth Moore at the LA Times. Now, Booth Moore turns out to be the leading fashion writer of the LA Times. She had, just by happen, she was in the store, saw the display, and she was calling me as a journalist to find out, was I really going to give away a new pair of shoes every time I sold a pair? Is that true? And I said yes, and I told her the whole story, and she said, well, I would love to get this in my column. Can you send me a picture of one of your favorite pairs of TOMS? And I sent her a picture, and she said, okay, well, I'll try to get into a column. So that was on a Thursday. So not that Saturday, but the next Saturday, on the cover of the LA Times, there are 2 headlines. The first headline reads, Da Vinci Code opens at $300 million in box office sales. Okay, in LA we care about those things. But the second headline was TOMS shoes. Now get this, we sold 2,200 pairs of shoes on our website before 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, I only had 140 pairs in my apartment. So this is the first of many supply chain problems to come. And the funny thing about it is I don't know if you've ever done this, if you've ever sold anything online, but there was this little function that I could have the website send me an email every time I got an order. And that was cool for like the first week when it was like my parents ordered some, my college roommate ordered some, but 2,200 at once? It was pretty funny. I woke up that morning, I'll never forget, Saturday morning. I don't get the newspaper at that time. And I turn on my BlackBerry, and it just starts vibrating uncontrollably. And I don't know if this ever happened to you, but like when you're getting so many messages at once, you can't even change the screen, so it's like frozen. So I'm sitting here looking at it on the table, and it's just spinning around. And this is happening for like 15 or 20 minutes, and finally the battery just dies because it vibrated itself to death. And so then at this point, I still don't know why, so I go to meet some friends for brunch at like 11 o'clock now, Saturday morning, and I walk into brunch right down the street, and my friend's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Can you believe it? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, surely someone called you, Blake. I mean, you know, you're on the cover of the newspaper. And I was like, no, my phone's been messed up. And then I started to realize what had happened. But, you know, we'd already sold 1,000 pairs even by 11 o'clock that morning. So 2,200 pairs, right? I mean, I have no idea, A, if the guy who made the first 250 pairs can make any more at this level. You know, B, I have to be back at work at the online driver's ed company on Monday. I mean, it was exciting, but at the same time, terrifying. You know, I had no idea. I mean, this wasn't even a big article. It was just a small article. So I did what I think other entrepreneurs do in a time of dire need. And I started putting as many ads for interns on Craigslist as possible. And that worked. By the next Saturday, I had 20 hopeful interns coming to the company headquarters, which was my apartment, you know, thinking that they were going to have this great summer internship. And I remember, you know, having to really sell these interns because it was a non-paid internship. My apartment is in a bad part of Los Angeles, and you know, they're weighing the options between working at some cool ad agency or at my kitchen table. You know, it was tough. But luckily, I convinced 3 of the interns to stay, and they're still with me today. One of them runs all the global logistics and operations of TOMS, and he's 25 years old, and he has a mohawk. But I got him to stay, and I said, look, here's the deal, guys. I'm going back to Argentina. I'm going to figure out how to make these shoes, because we got to fill these orders. You guys, I need to call and email every single one of these 2,000 people, because they think they're getting their shoes like any day now. It's going to be more like 8 or 9 weeks until I figure this out. So I go back to Argentina. Alejo and I, you know, they can't believe it. I have copies of the newspaper. I'm showing all the shoemakers to show them that I'm really a real deal now and that they need to help us. And after about a month, we got it to where we could make about 700 pairs a week, which was great. 100 pairs a day. We were cranking them out. We got back in a month. I started shipping the shoes to all the customers that ordered from the LA Times. And this is July 2006. So now we've been doing this project for 3 months. You know, we sold a couple thousand pairs, not the 250 that I'd hoped. And in July 2006, a movie came out. A movie called The Devil Wears Prada. How many people saw that movie? Raise your hand. Okay, so more than half. So I saw that movie too when it came out. My parents were in town that weekend, the whole family, we went and saw it. And so after seeing that movie, you can imagine that when the second phone call I got, which was from Anna Wintour's office at Vogue magazine, you can imagine how horrified I was. I mean, I just saw this movie and saw what she did to Anne Hathaway's character. Like, what is she going to do to a guy from Texas who knows nothing about fashion? But, you know, when Anna calls and Vogue calls, you go, and I did, and then this came out. Now, this was a really big deal for us. And I want to point something out, which is probably pretty obvious, but Vogue does something really interesting here. Vogue creates this article and this image and the whole thing, and this does not look like a guy who's selling shoes out of his apartment with 3 interns, right? I mean, they make it look like I really know what I'm doing. And because of that, all of a sudden, everyone in the fashion industry thought we were like a real company. So we started getting calls from Nordstroms and Barney's and Bloomingdale's and Selfridges in London and stores in Tokyo. And I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, just like, nonstop. And a funny part of that is at that point, we were still working in my apartment. There were 3 interns, and we had this one cordless phone that was the business line. The only problem with this cordless phone was the battery didn't charge very well, so it always had to stay on the charger. So we had an unspoken rule that if you were closest to the charger when the phone rang, you answered it. So it didn't matter if it was me or one of the interns or whatever. So one day, shortly after this article comes out, phone rings, I answer it, and I say, "Hi, this is Blake, TOMS Shoes." And this guy on the other line, and he's like really agitated. And he says, yes, I need to order 100 pairs of women's TOMS. And he's like, his voice is like shaking. He's like, navy, red, and natural, and I need them to go out today. And I'm like, okay, first off, who are you? You know, where are you calling from? I say, oh, I'm so sorry, I apologize. Yes, I'm the assistant women's buyers for Nordstrom shoes at the corporate office in Seattle. Now, Nordstrom's in the United States is like the holy grail of shoes. I mean, companies work 8, 9, 10 years to even get an appointment there. They don't just call you. So I'm thinking, come on, really? Like, is this a prank call? Like, you know, this just doesn't happen, you know? I'm sitting here, and this guy's like, no, this is extremely serious. My job is to have these shoes, you know, before they end up in magazines and people are talking about them. And now, your company is in Vogue magazine, like I didn't know. And he's like, and our customers are coming in asking for these shoes, and my boss is pissed. So I got to get 100 pairs of these shoes to get a test order, and I need them to go out today. And I'm like, okay, so this guy is serious. I'm like, well, that's awesome, sir, but the problem is I don't have any shoes to send you right now. And this guy goes, no, you don't understand. This is Nordstrom. Like, I'm only need 100 pairs. And I say, sir, as polite as I can be, I say, I appreciate this, Nordstrom, and I'm super excited, but I'm completely sold out. I mean, we have no shoes to send out right now. So this guy, listen to this, he gets pissed off at me. And he says, listen, buddy, if you can't help me, put me in touch with your sales department. Now I'm sitting here with my cordless phone that's about to go dead. It can only stay on the charger so long. And I'm looking at my 3 interns at the kitchen table. And one of the girls, Liza's laughing because she's kind of overhearing this conversation. So I think, okay, you're smart. Let's let you deal with it. So I literally grab the cordless phone and I toss it to her. She grabs it. She goes, hi, this is Liza in sales. So now I'm laughing hysterically, right? And the guy next to her, Jonathan, is laughing, and she's trying to explain to this guy that, we love Nordstrom, and man, we're going to ship this right out. And she's like, being really sweet and trying to kind of, take his order and all this. And he's not having it at all. He's just getting more and more pissed. So then he tells Liza that he's demanding to speak to someone in customer service. So she then gives the phone to Jonathan, who's the 3rd intern. And at this point, we're all laughing so hard that Jonathan can't even speak. He's like, I'm going to have like a side cramp. So finally, this guy, calms down enough to really realize that we're not joking with him. Like, this is like 3 interns, 1,000 square foot apartment, Venice, California. Like, the guy he actually talked to the first time is the guy in the magazines. So, like, be nicer next time. Like, it was unbelievable. And so this article, created this, and this is, I think, an interesting lesson of how a single piece of media can create this whole illusion that this was some, well-run machine. But luckily, because of this article, the demand kept going up, and we were able to make more shoes, and we got to where we could make 1,000 pairs a week and 2,000 pairs a week, and we ended up selling 10,000 pairs out of my apartment in that summer. So 10,000 pairs. So at 10,000, that was kind of the magic number. That was when I decided, okay, now we're going to go back to Argentina, and we're going to give them all away. And the interesting thing is the cool thing is I got to take my interns. I took my parents who had never left the United States before. I took my brother, I took my sister, I took my 3 buddies from college, 16 of us total, went to Argentina, not just to give away these shoes, but to literally hand place every single pair onto a child's foot. And the interesting thing when I get to speak to a group of people and tell my story, oftentimes people will ask at the end, they'll say, Blake, when you had the idea for TOMS, did it change your life? And as romantic and noble as it would be to say yes, when I had the idea, it was life-changing, the truth is, no. The answer is no. When I had the idea, it was just a what if. It was a what if we sold these, could we give away these shoes? It wasn't a big business plan. It wasn't some epiphany or calling or anything. But I can tell you this. When I went and we did the first shoe drop and we hand-placed those 10,000 shoes on those kids' feet, my life changed like I could never imagine. It was, to this day, I remember the first school we went to. I look over and my mom is over in the corner, quietly, maybe 5, 6 little boys around her. And not only is she taking these shoes and putting them on these kids' feet, but she's literally cleaning each of these kids' feet off herself. And these feet smell. Some of them haven't worn shoes in weeks. Some of them haven't worn shoes in years. And I mean, and there's cuts and infections, and she's taking every single one of those kids' feet, just as if it was mine or my sister's or my brother's. And I remember looking at her, and I just lost it. I mean, I just started crying and crying, and I couldn't stop, and so much that I scared all the kids away that were near me, because we each had our own sections. And I wasn't just crying because it was my mom. I was crying because 5 months earlier, I'd been in the same place and put used shoes on these kids' feet and wondered what was going to happen to the next pair. And now, just with this little idea, we were giving these kids shoes, and we had so many more than we needed even to give in this one school. And it was just amazing that this power, this idea was allowing me to be back here and giving these shoes. And it was amazing because that was the first day, and then the next day was a totally different set of experiences and more kids in different places and clinics and rural areas. And I'll never forget, we did this for 2 weeks. Almost the last or second to last day that we were doing this, we just finished with about 800 kids. And this time it was actually my dad and I and my buddy John. And we were walking back to the vans to go to the next school. And this woman came up to us, and she was crying, just crying. And she had these 3 little boys running behind her, and they were all wearing new red pairs of TOMS shoes. And she's speaking in Spanish really, really quickly. And my Spanish isn't very good, so I can't understand her. And so I go over and get one of the translators that we had in our group traveling with us. And I said, "Sir, will you please ask this woman what's wrong with her? Her kids have shoes, yet she's crying." And so he asked her in Spanish what's wrong. And when she answers him in Spanish, I can tell she starts to smile. And then I can look at him and hear what he's hearing, I mean, not understanding it, and he starts to really smile. So I realize even before he gives me the translation that she's crying because she's happy. But what he told me blew my mind. He told me that this woman, the reason she was so happy and crying and wanting to come up and talk to us was because for the past year, her 3 boys, and those were her 3 sons, had been sharing 1 pair of shoes. And what that meant was her oldest son would go to school on Monday, and he would come home, and he would give his pair of shoes to his middle brother and wait until Thursday to go back to school till we could have the shoes. I mean, can you imagine for those of you who have kids, that your kids sharing a single pair of shoes and that they're only able to go to school on the day that they can wear them? I mean, it blew me away. 1 pair of shoes. And the shoes that she showed us were this old pair of like Oxford leather men's shoes that didn't even fit the kids, and I'm sure gave them blisters. And I mean, she was so excited because not only were her kids going to all go to school every single day, but they're going to go together. And they had to walk a long way to get there. And after I had that conversation with that lady, and that was, like I said, the day before we left, I got on that plane, and I knew that my life would never be the same. I knew that this could be so much bigger than just these 10,000 kids. And it had to be, because there were so many more families just like that woman who desperately needed these shoes. And so I got on the plane, and it's an 11-hour flight from Buenos Aires back up to Dallas, and Dallas to LA. And normally I sleep really well on planes, but I stayed awake the entire night just thinking, how can I do this? Because at this point, I was still running the online driver's ed company and doing TOMS, and I knew that I had to just devote all my attention. So I decided on that flight that night that I was going to go back to my partners. I was a 3rd partner. There were 2 other partners, and I was going to tell the guys that even though that I was a founder of the company and I believed in what they were doing and the company was growing like crazy, that I wanted to dedicate all my time to TOMS. And the worst part about it was these 2 partners of mine were really good friends. So I was afraid not only was I going to be kind of letting them down from a business standpoint, but from a personal standpoint, because we really did this together. And so as soon as I landed, you land in, you get into LA, clear customs about 2 o'clock in the afternoon when you're coming back. I drove to the office, and I said, "Guys, I really need to talk to you about something important." And of course, they wanted to hear about the trip and all this. And I said, "No, before that, I really want to tell you something that's on my mind." And they got kind of serious, and they said, "Well, before that, we want to talk to you about something we've been thinking about." And I said, "Okay, well, what is it?" And they said, well, you know, we started this company a year and a half ago together. You were the original founder, and you were very excited about it. But over the past few months, you haven't been here very much, and now you've been gone for 3 weeks, and who knows when you're going to go again. And we just don't really feel that it's fair if you continue to own this company but aren't working at it as hard as we were, so we would like to buy you out. Now, talk about a serendipitous moment in my life. I mean, I was going there, I was going to be willing to walk. I mean, I just wanted to focus on TOMS, but now, not only was I going to get to focus all my energy on TOMS, but they're actually going to pay me to do so. So, over a week, we negotiated very quickly, and they bought 33%, which was what I owned of the company. I was able to take all that money, and that's when TOMS really got to get going, because now I had some capital that I could invest in TOMS to get some people who really knew what they were doing. So the first thing I did is I hired a guy from Nike who worked in sales, and he knew exactly how to talk to the Nordstrom's people, because we clearly needed some help there. The second guy I hired was a guy who worked at ASICS. We needed someone who could help us scale the production and really develop a better fitting shoe and a shoe we could do. So we hired those two guys, and we're still in the apartment, and we had a few more interns, and then we started getting some more press. Time magazine, People magazine. I mean, it was really getting excited. Orders were coming in from all over the world, and we ended up selling that year 50,000 pairs of shoes, and that's when we went to South Africa, gave those away, and then something really interesting that I never anticipated. We started getting next slide. We started getting celebrities wearing our shoes, and in the United States, this has a huge impact on fashion, and I mean globally it does, but specifically I think with all the obsession we have in the States, and it was so interesting because this was a shoe that farmers wore in Argentina, and now girls were wearing it to events and on the red carpet, and I mean it was just bizarre. And do you guys know this band Hansen? Remember this song, and you might maybe even your kids, the song Bop? They were like 7, 8-year-olds. They were like this sensation. Well, they've kind of made a comeback, and it's pretty funny because everyone, like I'm 33, and so when I was like, I don't know, maybe 10, 11, 12, these guys were like the sensation, and every single one loved this band. And so then they kind of disappeared after Bop, and no one heard from them for all these years. And so then about 4 years ago, when TOMS started, these guys kind of started to make a real comeback. And I got this call one day from Taylor Hansen, the guy in the middle. And he's explaining who he is, and I don't know how he got my number, but he did. And I'm like, I have no idea who you are. And he's like, Bop. And then, of course, I remembered. And so that was like his calling card, right? And so, and he said, I really want to come meet with you because I had this idea. And I said, okay, sure, come, I'm in the office every day, just come by. So he came by, and his idea was this, it's pretty interesting. He said, our new album is called The Walk, and we all wear your shoes, and we love what you do, and we would like to do something to help raise awareness. So what I want to do is, before every single one of my concerts, I want to get our audience to take off their shoes and to do a 1-mile walk outside around the venue before we start. And that way people can see what it feels like to not have shoes. And also we can raise awareness and maybe even sell TOMS. Now Taylor's really excited about this, and he's telling me this thing, and I look at Taylor and I'm like, this is a pretty interesting idea, and no doubt people walking a mile, that'll get them to kind of start to feel what it's like. But I said, Taylor, it's November and your next concert is in Chicago. Like, no one's taking off their shoes, buddy. And I'll never forget what Taylor did. He looks at me, deadpan, and he winks. He says, Blake, you have no idea how passionate our fans are. And the truth is, I didn't know, but 2 months after that, I went to my first Hansen concert, which was like 20,000 screaming teenage girls, and I realized this guy could ask them to take off anything, and they were. So shoes was easy. But I think it's a great example. So listen to what happened. He did 30 of these walks, had thousands of people participate, sold thousands of TOMS shoes, so much that I brought him and his brothers with us to South Africa to give away the shoes. And it's just an example of how a simple idea could have such a... And to this day, some of the biggest TOMS fans are people who went on those initial walks. And the truth is I could stand up here and just tell story after story after story about things that have happened at TOMS and what has kind of taken us on this amazing journey. But when I got invited to come speak today, I was doing some research and kind of looking at who was going to be in the audience and from what countries, from what disciplines, and I decided that I was going to spend the time that I have and the little time that I have left really just focusing on one simple thing. And I'm going to give you, the simple thing is a philosophy, if you will, an ideology that I have really developed in the past few years. And it's one that I never really anticipated developing. And it really goes like this. So when I started TOMS, it was a spontaneous response to help these kids. I didn't come from philanthropy. I didn't come from charity. I was an entrepreneur. I'd started 4 other companies before TOMS. I thought entrepreneurially, and so when I saw a problem, I thought, I'm going to, use a business mechanism to help solve this problem, right? So it was a spontaneous response. And when I went on that first shoe drop, it felt so good. And so giving, no doubt, feels good. And anyone in the room who's ever donated money, time, service, whatever, you know the feeling you get when you give, and it feels good. But what I've learned the last 3 years, undeniably, is that giving is very good business. And that's okay. A lot of people that makes uncomfortable. They think philanthropy here, business here. But TOMS, we're a for-profit business. And we're a profitable for-profit business now. And it's only because we've incorporated giving into our model. And so in my hope and encouragement of getting other people to incorporate giving into their model, I want to very clearly lay out a couple reasons and anecdotes of how giving has been such a good business for us. So the first thing is when you incorporate giving into your model, your customers automatically become your greatest marketers. That is so clear to us at TOMS. TOMS has never spent any money on traditional advertising. Yet we're one of the fastest growing shoe companies in the world today. And it's because our customers have done it for us. I'll never forget the first time I experienced this. I was in the JFK airport in New York City. I was literally running to catch a flight. I was not wearing TOMS. I was actually wearing running shoes that day. And I got to the American Airlines check-in kiosk, right? And I'm hurrying to catch my flight, and I'm in a hurry, and I'm doing the doot as fast as I can. And I look down, and there's this girl wearing a red pair of TOMS. Now, this is in month 5 of the project. So even though we had sold, 8,000 pairs of shoes, I had never, at this point, seen a stranger wearing our shoes. I'd seen my friends and family and interns and people in my neighborhood, but never been that far away from home and seen a stranger. So I'm super excited, and I'm not wearing TOMS, to ask this girl. So I say, get myself composed. I say, excuse me, I really like these red shoes. What are they? With a straight face. And she looks at me, and her eyes kind of widen, and she says, TOMS shoes. And I'm trying to play it cool, right? So I'm doing the check-in still. I'm not kidding. She grabs my shoulder, literally rips me away from this machine, and she goes, no, you don't understand. This is the most amazing company in the world. When I bought this pair of shoes, they gave a pair to a child in Argentina. And there's this guy, he lives in Los Angeles. I think he lives on a boat. But he went to Argentina, and he was on vacation. Literally, she starts telling me my life story, word for word, like with more passion than my mom tells it. It was unbelievable. And she's animated, and people are gathering around, and I'm like, oh gosh, I got to tell her who I am now, right? So after I let her talk for a little bit longer, and she's getting the points exactly right. It was amazing. And I said, I'm sorry, excuse me, you know what? Actually, I'm Blake. I started TOMS. And she looks at me, deer in headlights. And she goes, why did you cut your hair? That was her only question. That summer I had a buzz haircut, and I haven't cut it since. So I took her advice, but we started laughing, and I gave her a hug, and I said thank you. But the interesting thing is, I went back to the plane, 6-hour flight, back to Los Angeles, and it just hit me so clear. I thought, okay, hold on. That is one girl who thought she was speaking to a stranger at the airport. If she had that much passion to tell a stranger our story, surely she's told her family, her friends. I'm sure she's posted about it on Facebook. She's probably done a tweet about it. I mean, how many people have bought a pair of TOMS because of this one girl? And therefore, how many shoes have we given away because of her? And, you know, I like to model things out and you know, I got out my yellow pad of paper and I started doing some just simple basic math. And I realized if like 1 out of every 5 customers was like this girl, the exponential growth we would have would just be uncanny. I mean, it'd be unbelievable. I mean, in 10 years, we'd be the size of Nike. I mean, seriously. So we're on year 4. Remember this date. But seriously, I mean, it was unbelievable to me. And so what I realized then on that plane, and this is what we have been so committed to ever since, is we didn't need to worry about clever advertising. We didn't need to focus on marketing per se. We just need to focus on giving. And giving in a sustainable and responsible way. And as important, and I believe this is why we have grown the way we have, we need to involve our customers. We take them on trips with us. And we need to be able to create content so people can share what it's all about. So we have tons of videos on YouTube that have been seen hundreds of thousands of times. You know, hundreds of thousands of pictures on Flickr of people's experiences on shoe drops. But if we focused on giving and we gave our customers the tools to spread it, then they would be the marketers for us. And I believe that's why I'm standing here, and that's why we've given away over 600,000 shoes, and we'll give away our millionth shoe here in a couple of months. So giving allows your customers to be your marketers. The second thing is, and this is really the silver lining, and I think this can be involved in any business. It doesn't have to be a business like TOMS. It doesn't have to be a consumer product company. Is when you incorporate this idea of giving and serving into your business in a really intimate way, you attract and retain the most amazing employees in the world. I mean, we have people who've left Nike, Asics, Goldman Sachs, you know, Patagonia, Martha Stewart, Inc. magazine. I mean, people have come from all over to work at TOMS, and it's not because we pay more. We don't. It's not because we work in a fancy office. We don't even have air conditioning or heat. People wear bathing suits in the summer and mittens and gloves in the winter. We work in a warehouse in Los Angeles. But people want to be part of something. And I think more than ever, people want to feel that what they do during their day every day is going to make a difference. And sometimes when I go and speak to different companies, we talk through and workshop, and I talk about how you can actually do that with a product or in something that's part of your core business. But sometimes it's just incorporating volunteerism within your company. And instead of taking your clients to play golf or to Ruth Chris Steakhouse, take them and go serve one day together. Because the interesting thing is, whether it's your clients or your employees, once you start doing actual service with your hands, and when you're getting dirty doing it, everyone forgets about all their problems. You know, the employees that don't really like each other or serving next to each other, they come back to the office, different experience. The client that you're having trouble with has that experience with, and you share that forever. So I am such a big proponent, and if there's anything I can ask you guys to think about when you go back is, how do you incorporate giving into your business? Because it will have a huge impact on the way your whole culture is with your employees and with your clients. And the third point, and this is what I'll close on, and how I've kind of realized that giving is good for business, is with anything you start, whether it's a business, a nonprofit, anything. In order to have success, you've got to have great partners. You can't do it alone. And especially a startup shoe company, especially one that doesn't advertise. I mean, you really need good partners. And TOMS has been incredibly blessed with all different types of great partners. One of the coolest things was the first holiday season. I got a call, not from Vogue on the editorial side, but on the publishing side. And the publisher of Vogue, Tom Florio, he decided that year he was going to give TOMS to every single person on his holiday list. Now this man gives probably 580 of the most influential people in the fashion industry a gift. And this year he was going to give TOMS, he was going to pay full price, which was the big deal for us back then, because it was the first holiday. But because he did that, all these other heads of all these fashion companies and heads of Nordstroms and different retailers saw Vogue was giving TOMS for holiday. And that was a huge thing. And now a huge part of our business, about 8% of our sales every year are corporate gifting. Whether it's giving them to employees for rewards or company retreats or holiday gifts to clients. And that's because Tom partnered with us from the very beginning because he wanted to give a gift that mattered. And that resembled something that was reflected well on him. And then the second partner that came from that was Ralph Lauren. At this point, Ralph had been running his company and designing for 40 years without ever designing something for another brand, without ever doing a collaboration. But the very first one that Ralph did was with us. And he did it for his rugby stores. And it was a huge success, not only for Ralph, but for us, and all these new people learned about TOMS. And I think that Ralph did that because he's a very philanthropic guy, and he loves to do things differently. But he also did it because he saw that a very young audience was connecting with TOMS, and that audience was important to his stores, and especially the rugby brand. And so that was a great partner. And then the last partner that happened just last year that had a huge impact on our business, and if you live in the United States, you probably saw it, but AT&T did a commercial about my life and about TOMS. And they did it because I use AT&T, and I spend most of my life traveling around, giving shoes, speaking, running the business. And AT&T realized that was a very authentic way to show how their technology was helping me run my business and therefore helping me give more shoes away. And I'll never forget, I got to have breakfast with the chairman of AT&T, and I went there, and the very first thing I did is start telling him how thankful I was because last year we sold an extra 100,000 pairs of shoes just because of that commercial that we were able to attribute just to that commercial. So 100,000 kids were getting shoes because of it. And when I went to say thank you to him, he stopped me, and he said, Blake, don't thank me. We're here to thank you. We've never seen a response to a commercial and a positive feeling to AT&T when we do these focus groups like we did when we ran that commercial. And they ran it so many times that they ended up taking it from a 30-second spot and turning it into a minute spot and premiering the minute spot, the finale of American Idol, which is one of the most widely watched shows in the United States. So he was so thankful. So what I realized in all those three partnerships, even though they're all very different, is that when you incorporate giving into your model, into your business, other businesses, even businesses that might even be competitive, will want to partner with you to see more good work happen because it helps them incorporate it into their business as well. So in summary, if anything that my story and the ups and downs and the fun that has happened in the last 4 years, I think is worth noting is that truly, we started because giving felt good, and I felt a spontaneous desire to do it. But no doubt, I stand up here today because giving is good for business. So I encourage you guys to incorporate it into yours. Thank you very much.